So to print, you need to prepare your space. So I've gone a bit crazy with the newspaper. I've put newspaper under both of my background pages. And then I've also put newspaper on the table, and that's just because printing ink is pretty nasty stuff. It's oil based, so it doesn't come off things very easily, and it's really difficult to clean up. So I've got my paint tray, and you can just see in that top corner there a little bit of splodge of printing ink. I've got a roller. I've got this guy, so my printing plate. And then I've also got my scrap paper from before, because what I'm going to do is do a couple of testers on that piece of scrap paper, and then I'm going to put it to one side and have a go at doing printing in each thing. So, to start off with, I'm just going to roll out. Sorry, I had to turn the sound off here because the roller was too squeaky and you couldn't hear what I was saying. But you want to spread out the ink, and you want to get the roller completely covered, but you don't want it too thick, so you don't want it like dripping off. You want to kind of layer up the ink, so add more, rather than a little bit like nail varnish, I suppose. You just don't want to go in with one thick layer. So once you have got your print covered, then you can start to think about pressing it onto the tester paper. Right, so that is now covered, and again, that's covered, but it's not too thick. So I'm going to turn it upside down and put it in that top corner there. And I'm just going to use my, this part of my finger to really press it on and try and put even pressure across the whole thing. And then I'm carefully going to peel it off. Now, that one, I think, shows that you can't do too much detail. So here, I'm missing a lot of the detail that I put in on those plants, and up in my roses, I'm missing quite a lot of definition. And I think I could actually do with a little bit more ink on, but that is why we do this practice. So I'm going to do the same thing again. And this time I'm actually going to try putting pressure on the other side. Okay, so that one has definitely come out better. So I think what I've learned from my testers is that I need to do more ink than I did on my first one, and I possibly need to think about where I'm putting the pressure. So now I'm going to do all of these, and I'm going to think about those lessons that I've learned by doing this. I'm going to have those just to one side so that I can still see them, so that they remind me what to do. Okay. You can see as I'm doing this that I'm trying really hard to not get ink on my fingers, because when you get ink on your fingers, it just starts to get messy, because obviously your fingers then transfer it to the paper and it's not necessarily in places that you want it. So it's really important to try and keep as tidy and clean as possible. I personally find this extremely hard because I am a very messy artist. And so I find this quite tricky about printmaking. But you can also see that I'm trying to keep the consistency up. So I'm trying to keep enough ink on my print and all of that sort of stuff every time we do it, especially after my practices where I didn't put enough ink on the first one. So thinking about those things that you learned in your practice as well. I have now printed all of mine. You can see that my hands are pretty covered in paint, which is something you need to be really careful of.
So I'm going to pop them on the drying rack in a second to wait for them to dry. But I already know these two, are they on camera? Oh no. I'll zoom out a little bit. So my two favourite ones are these end ones here. I think they've worked really, really well. But you can see that my design was probably a tad too complicated to make into this style of print. I still think it looks really, really effective, but it might have been better had I chosen a slightly simpler design, which is quite tricky to get your head around, I think, when you are starting out. But anyway, really happy with the result, and now I'm just going to pop it on the drying rack and wait for it to dry.